Welcome back to Backyard Boatworks, guys. In this video I continue working on customizing this fiberglass piece, and I prep some hatch receiver and lid molds to make some parts, and then at the end I pop off one of the finished receivers. So if you're new here or didn't catch my previous Boatyard vlog, I believe it's 002, I'll put a link to it down in the description, but this is a fiberglass binnacle mount, a throttle mount that the customer needed me to add 3 inches of width to. So here I'm just grinding down some of the glass that I laid a few days ago, and in the next video I'm going to be shooting the polyurethane paint on it. So after laying down the first layer of chop strand mat, I had some air bubbles underneath that, and I had to grind out those air bubbles here. So I couldn't leave those in, or it was just going to cause problems later. So I'm going to use some radius filler, general purpose filling compound to fill that in. And then I'm going to have to come back and lay some more glass here where I wasn't able to fill in this radius. And that's what I'm working on next. So this is a product that I like to use for general void filling. Sometimes it's a radius putty. It's actually designed to be used to make radiuses when you're blending certain things in or tabbing things in. And I'm just going to use it here to fill in some areas where those air bubbles existed. So this radius putty is designed to stay tacky for a long period of time. I'm pretty sure it would stay tacky for probably up to a day or so, because when you're laying polyester products, you want to put them wet on wet. So here I'm just using it to fill any of the low spots that I had after grinding, and then I'm going to lay chop strand mat over that before it fully cures. Alright, so moving on to a new project. A customer paid me to make a hatch receiver and lid mold. So here I'm starting by spraying some PVA really lightly on these molds. And once that first tack coat dries, I'll come back here and spray some heavier coats. I put about 4 or 5 coats of PVA on and let that dry off before I move on to the gel coat. Alright, so here I switched guns. Now I'm shooting with a 2.5mm tip gun loaded with gel coat. It's not thinned at all. So this is just a super basic white gel coat, and I'm going to lay it on pretty heavy here, paying particular attention to get it pretty thick in the corners. And after this is sprayed down, this actually ends up sitting overnight. Alright, now back to this piece again, and jumping back and forth to different projects. So I went through and laid the chop strand mat down and sanded it and grinded it smooth, but I still have some low spots. And I also have to fix the edge, so I'm going to use epoxy to do this. I would have rather used polyester because it dries super fast, but because I need to fix that radius corner, I need the extra strength, the compression strength of epoxy. So here I'm mixing up some 2-to-1 thickened epoxy, and then I'm going to use that to fill any of the low spots, fix the radius where it's low, and then this is going to have to sit overnight. All right, so this is actually the next day, and this epoxy is all nice and cured. And going to take the DA sander again and just sand this out smooth. And you can see here where I fixed that radius. So I'm going to try to get that radius to be perfect to match all the other radiuses on this piece. So one of the issues I noticed when he dropped this piece off was the top of it had a dip, was in the mold. So you can see that little about 1/8 inch gap underneath the painter stick. So I'm just going to use the painter stick as a straight edge, put some epoxy in the middle, and then drag it along so that I can get this top piece perfectly fair. So I'm using epoxy again just because it's best for something like this, which is a little bit of a thicker repair. So just putting it in the middle there and then dragging the flat edge to make it perfectly square. So unfortunately, again, with epoxy, it's going to take several hours for it to cure. It is warm out, and I mixed it a little hot, so luckily I have this hatch receiver mold to work on. Alright, so I shot the gel coat yesterday and let it sit overnight. The gel coat doesn't have any wax in it, so it stays pretty tacky. You want the gel coat to set up for quite a while, because if you don't, the styrene in the resin will attack the gel coat, and you'll get what's called alligatoring. Basically, it looks like alligator skin where it starts to melt the gel coat underneath. So here I have pre-cut 1.5 ounce chop strand matte strips, and laying it over that resin that I brushed on. And then I'm going to continue to just push this chop strand mat into all the radiuses of this mold. Alright, so now moving on to the lid mold. Basically doing the same thing here, just pouring some resin into the mold, brushing it out even, and then I'm going to start by putting 1.5 ounce chop strand mat into this mold. So something you want to pay attention to here is the little pieces that stick straight up. They're going to want to have a tendency to fold back in. And if they do that, then they're going to pull themselves away from the mold. So you want to make sure that you roll it over the radius. So I put a small 1/4 inch radius on the top of my molds because I know that that's going to be a problem. And that radius helps the chop strand to fold outward and not have a tendency to fold back inward with the weight of the resin on the chop strand. So I went around with the thin roller and pushed everything into place. So now I want to just let this kick off. It's pretty warm today, so it should kick off pretty fast. But the reason I want to let this skin tack off is so that when I go to put the second and third layers on, I don't want to accidentally pull this skin layer out of the radius, because if that happens, that's when you're going to get air pockets. It's hard to tell if you pull the resin out with the roller underneath. So letting this tack off, it'll pretty much just lock itself in place. So here I cut a 3/8 inch sheet of Nitacore, which is a plastic honeycomb coring material, and I put another layer of chop strand mat into the lid mold, and then here I'm just coating the scrim material on the back of this honeycomb, and I'm going to set it into the mold and then put some weight on it and then wait for that to cure before I move forward with the rest of the glass. So after that was set in place, I just found some heavy pieces laying around the boatyard and put some weight on it, and then I'll let it cure for maybe 30 minutes or so, and then I'll take the weight off and start laying the rest of the glass. So before I continue with the rest of the glass, there's a little gap around this coring material, so I mixed up some more of that fiberglass Florida radius putty, and I'm just using it to fill in that small gap between the chop strand mat and the Nitacore coring piece. So I like to lay a little extra chop strand mat around the edges just to beef up the edge of this lid a little bit, because when you're opening and closing it and things like that, and it's going to get banged against the receiver, it'll have a tendency to maybe get chipped. I want to make that edge a little bit stronger if I can. And then I put in one sheet of 1708 biaxial on top of that, and then I finish it off again with 2 more layers of 1.5 ounce chop strand. Alright, so I let this sit for a couple hours, and it's pretty cured, and I think this is where I'm going to wrap up this video here. I'm just using some plastic wedges to pop it off, and you can see it comes off super easy, really no struggle at all. And that little green tint in the gel coat there is PVA, and that just washes off with water and pretty much would pull off by itself. So that's going to wrap it up. In the next video, I pop the lid out of the mold, and I also spray the white polyurethane on that fiberglass piece that I was working on. I appreciate it, guys. Look out for the next video, and I'll see you in the next one.